Article 1, Section 14, Harwood College, 3 years before Election Day. Jonathan Hall didn't have the idea he had promised Shanice during the previous week's meeting. He called her anyway, hoping that he could come up with something on the spot. Shanice seemed happy to get his call. "You want to grab coffee at the bean shop tomorrow?" Hall asked. "Sure, how's noon?" "See you there." Hall arrived at the bean shop a little early. He ordered his usual black coffee and found a spot on one of the couches. Hoping for some last-minute inspiration, Hall pulled his copy of Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals from his backpack. It wasn't long before he looked up from his reading to see Shanice crossing the parking lot through the storefront window. He was wondering what kind of course load Shanice must be taking to need a backpack so overloaded when she stepped up onto the sidewalk and promptly slipped on a patch of ice. Hall hopped from the couch and hurried to the sidewalk. He knelt down beside her to help her to her feet. "Not the spectacular entrance I was hoping for," Shanice admitted. "You okay?" Hall asked. "Yeah, I think so," she said. "Wow, look at your eye." Shanice stepped over to try to have a look at her bruised face in her reflection on the coffee shop window. "You sure you're okay?" "I think so." "Let me take you to the university clinic. Let's make sure you're really okay." "A doctor's waiting room? That's where we're going on our date?" "Let's just make sure you're okay," Hall repeated. He went to get his stuff from the couch. Sitting with Shanice in the waiting room of the clinic, Hall regarded the bruise that throbbed angrily on the autumn-brown skin around her eye. "You still want to mess with the Sanger Center?" "Always." "Back in high school, I did some computer hacking with my friend Kevin. This time, instead of hacking computers, we're going to hack people." "Hacking?" "Yeah, we used to make other people's computers do what we wanted, mostly for giggles, nothing destructive. Anyway, what I'm thinking of is guerrilla journalism. It's like hacking, but without a computer." Before Hall could continue, a nurse opened the waiting room door and called Shanice's name. "First, find out if you're okay. Call me when you're done. I'll tell you what I have in mind. Clear your schedule for tomorrow, probably the next day too." "Call you later," Shanice said. Hall was taking a package of ground beef out of the refrigerator for dinner when his phone rang. It was Shanice. "So, what's your idea?" she asked. "I don't get a hello first?" "Oh, yeah. Hi, Jonathan." "The doctor said you're okay, right?" "Yeah, just a bit banged up." "Good. How old are you now? 19? "Yeah." "You look 16. I bet if we braided your hair into pigtails, you'd look younger still." "What are you getting at?" "You're all beat up, right? Well, I'm a lot bigger than you. I'm older, too. We're going to get you an abortion." "An abortion? What? Oh, wait," Shanice answered, and then paused. Then she laughed. "Don't make me laugh. My face hurts when I laugh." The 6'3" Hall towered over the 5' Shanice. Since leaving Shanice at the clinic, Hall had been shopping. He found some whiskey, some fake tattoos, a pair of sunglasses, and a cheap purse for Shanice. In his closet, he found his old leather biker jacket. He borrowed a malodorous t-shirt from a pothead friend. When Shanice promised to meet him at his apartment the next morning, Hall applied the fake tattoos. On the knuckles of his right fist, he put the letters O-U-T. On the knuckles of his left, he put L-A-W. For good measure, he swelled up his right fist a bit by pummeling a wall a couple of times. Hall installed a cell phone camera on the purse. The next day, he drove his bruised friend to the Margaret Sanger Center for Women's Health. Hall had told Shanice to look young. When she arrived the next morning, she did not disappoint. The pigtails she had styled into her hair somehow brought attention to her large, dark eyes, making them look even larger. She could easily pass for 15, maybe even 13. They drove to the Sanger Center. Before walking into the clinic, Hall gargled a shot of whiskey and spit it onto the sidewalk. Putting on his sunglasses to imitate a hangover, Hall took Shanice firmly by the shoulder and steered her into the building. The waiting room at the Sanger Center was filled with bored-looking women texting and reading magazines. Shanice tried not to think about what some of these women were here to do. Hall noticed her look of sadness as Shanice observed a trio of olive-skinned teenagers sitting quietly in the seats across the room. They were accompanied by a plump, middle-aged woman wearily filing her nails. When the girl in the middle stopped brushing her raven hair and began to stand up, she was instantly returned to her place by the woman, hissing an order at her in Spanish. The girl sat back down without complaint. When she was called into the examining room, Shanice told the staff that she was 15 years old and badly in need of an abortion. Her 27-year-old boyfriend had impregnated her. Hall simply sat, glaring at her every time she seemed to say something he disliked. Shanice told the clinic workers that she needed to keep the abortion secret because she was terrified about her parents' reaction if they would find out about her relationship with the ominous young man who loomed over her as she spoke. None of the clinic employees asked Shanice about her black eye. They didn't seem to want to know. There were other things they didn't want to know. "Don't tell us your age. We don't want to know your age. We want to know as little as possible," responded the nurse. "It would be a good idea to tell us you were 16. Then we wouldn't have to report this to the police at all." Hall would remain silent except to utter just one line. He would use the most offensive word in the English language to indicate that he wanted no black offspring. "My baby ain't gonna be no..." His use of the N-word drew little more than a brief glare from the nurse. The staff was so eager to shepherd Shanice through their procedures that they would not risk upsetting her by ejecting her abusive, racist of a boyfriend from the clinic. No clinic employee mentioned that it was a felony for a 27-year-old to impregnate a 15-year-old girl. Hall and Shanice had similar results from visits to 2 more clinics. They uploaded the damning videos to the internet and contacted several news outlets with their findings. They received no response. Article 1, Section 15. Apartment, Indianapolis suburbs, 3 years before Election Day. The weak pink glow emanating from the half-open door of Kevin's bedroom was overpowered the moment Hall switched on the living room light. Walking over to the sliding glass door that led to the balcony, Hall opened the blinds to let in the daylight. Everything in the apartment remained exactly where it had been since Hall had left for the gym. Approaching the door to Kevin's bedroom, he noticed the source of that light. Kevin was engrossed in a text conversation on his laptop with a woman dressed as Ichika, an anime character featured in a popular Japanese animation series. The tattooed, pink-haired young woman was broadcasting from her bedroom. Filled with brightly colored overstuffed furniture and giant stuffed animals, her room looked like the set of a children's television show. The slim, large-breasted woman fluttered her round blue eyes at the men watching her video feed. As she did so, viewers would text her. In response, she would purr her answers into the camera. Occasionally, she would do the bidding of a correspondent who sent money. As he stared at the screen, Kevin slouched in his chair with his fingers on the keyboard. There was no expression on his loose and unshaven face. Empty bags of Del Ranchero chips and dirty clothing were scattered around the floor. The mess was the worst it had been in weeks. As he silently turned back to the living room, Hall heard Kevin hoisting himself out of the chair. Hall was already cracking eggs into a frying pan by the time Kevin was dressed and out of his bedroom. "Don't tell me," Kevin began when he entered the kitchen. "Don't tell you what?" "You know, about the..." Kevin said, gesturing to his room. "Want some breakfast?" "Yeah, I guess." Hall cracked a few more eggs into the pan as Kevin moved Hall's laptop aside and took a spot at the table. Soon, Hall arrived with 2 plates of fried eggs and placed one in front of Kevin before sitting down to his own meal. "It's just so difficult," Kevin said. "What?" "We've been exercising for weeks. I've been eating better too, but I'm not that much stronger than I was, I don't look much better, and I still don't have a girlfriend. This is so much harder than I thought it would be. I'm getting nowhere." "How hard did you think it would be?" "Not this hard." "What did you expect? You think this is going to be like a movie where the hero starts off very bad at something, and then there's a montage of him practicing a skill to upbeat music, and within 5 minutes he's an expert? Inspiration sells movie tickets. Persistence is boring, frustrating, and difficult." Kevin stared at his eggs. "I promise. It'll be worth it in the end," Hall said. "Worth it in the end," Kevin mumbled to himself. He poked at his eggs with a fork. "Your hard work has paid off for you before." After all that time you spent learning computers in high school, you breezed through computer science courses that I barely passed. I keep telling you that was easy. Maybe a bit easier for you than this, but don't you remember how people spoke about you and your talent? Math and computers were why the adults said you were special. It's easy to persist when you get that kind of feedback. Still, it took years to become what you are now. Fat load of good it did me. Didn't do you any good? Don't you have a bunch of job interviews lined up? Yeah. Kevin, you're going to be making a 6-figure salary right out of college. I guess I'm just depressed. Maybe instead of being depressed, you're just unhappy. What's the difference? Depressed makes it sound like you have an illness. Maybe you do, but maybe your life is just out of balance. You focus so much on developing one skill that the rest of your life lagged. Treat it like finding a bug in some code you wrote. Instead of being unhappy, fix the bug. Your feelings are telling you where to look for the problem. I just want to be happy. We all want to be happy. There's only one way to get there from here. Build something great. Master your life. Master social relations. Imagine how great your life can be in 3 to 5 years if you did what was good for you. That's encouraging. Stop being sarcastic. It is encouraging. You mean to tell me if I don't have a great career, build some big company, I'll never be happy? No. You just need a career good enough to be indispensable to the people you love. Those other goals are worthwhile. They might make you an important person. But by building a family, you'll be more than just important. You'll be indispensable. One day, you'll be able to look back with satisfaction at the life you've built and the good times you had together. Kevin's gaze focused as Hall continued. Marketers grooming future customers, political organizers, media, and educators grooming future activists. They try to sell you on the idea that those things that once brought meaning to our lives, such as family and faith, are not just ridiculous but evil. That our desire to become the kind of men who can head a family is nothing but an evil lust for power over women. Look at the lives of the young men who buy into that thinking. Deprived of meaning, they see no point in making themselves strong and independent. Seeing no other way towards happiness, they spend their time pushing their pleasure buttons, Hall said, getting up from the table and walking to the pantry. Hall came back to the table with a bag of Del Ranchero chips in his hand. Look here, he said. A bag full of happy, see? The General Snack and Treat Corporation is selling happiness. Is that really what they deliver? Do you realize how much research went into formulating the powdered cheese flavoring they apply to these chips? When you bite into them, the flavoring sprays across your tongue just so. They hired scientists to do brain scans so their chips make your brain holler out, "I like this, give me more." That's the exact opposite of that satisfied feeling that says, "I've created this by being good at life. I've got all I need." Kevin nodded. With the internet, small-time operators can also hijack your brain and put it to work for their own purposes, like that cartoon girl who seems to be hacking you. Hacking me? Yeah, it's like a phishing attack. A pretty girl uses her allure to get control of you by pushing those pleasure buttons, said Hall. There's no way she can hack into anything important with the information I gave her, Kevin responded. The information you gave her isn't the problem. The problem is you gave her a feather. A feather? I guess you didn't see that video. What video? I saw it a few months back. It was by Dr. Jeffrey Satinover. He's a psychiatrist, a neuroscientist. He even managed to get a PhD in quantum physics in his spare time. With that, Hall opened his laptop. Here, watch. Soaring over the meadow, in the golden light of the rising sun, a sparrow began his daily hunt for food. He hadn't found more than a few small worms by the time he approached the edge of the field. Preparing to exert himself for the flight over the woods that would take him to his next hunting ground, he heard the call of a merchant pushing a cart down the road. "Worms for feathers! Worms for feathers!" the merchant cried out. "Worms for feathers!" The curious sparrow landed on the cart. "Would you like to buy some worms from me?" the merchant asked. "For just 1 feather, you can get 2 worms." The sparrow looked at the merchant's wares. All of the worms were plump and shiny, but 2 of them were absolutely perfect, far better than any he had found on his own hunts. "You mean you'll give me those 2 worms, and all I have to give you is a feather?" Searching his plumage, he found a small, ragged feather that seemed about to fall out. "Yes, any 2 worms for just 1 feather." "Even this one?" he asked, pointing out the battered feather. "Yes, even that one. I just want you to be happy." "It's a deal," the sparrow exclaimed. He plucked the feather and claimed his prize. And indeed, the worms were even more delectable than he thought they would be. What the sparrow didn't realize was that the merchant was the devil. And so, the next day, when the sparrow was back to the drudgery of the hunt, he wasn't satisfied by any of the ordinary worms that he caught. None of them compared to those 2 fat, juicy worms that he bought the previous day. He smiled when he heard the merchant's call. With so many feathers, the sparrow would eat well for some time to come. He bought himself another 2 worms with a small feather, but this one wasn't quite as frazzled as the one he had spent the previous day. And so, each day the bird would visit the merchant, offering his feathers for those wonderful worms. First, his chest began to grow bare, then his tail, but the bird was pleased. He was growing fat from so many worms, but he fattened only slowly. He didn't, at first, notice that flying was becoming harder. It wouldn't have bothered him anyway. He could stop any time he wanted to. One day, after gobbling up his daily feast, he had to take a running start to get himself into the air. With so many feathers on his wings missing, he couldn't stay aloft for long. Still, he was back again on the merchant's cart the next day. But this time, his wings, plucked nearly bare of feathers, couldn't get him into the air at all after his feast. The grinning merchant watched as a crestfallen sparrow hopped away towards the forest. The sparrow remembered how he used to hunt. He used to find worms for himself instead of buying them. That gave him an idea. His dejected hopping soon turned into a frantic run. The sparrow ran and ran until he reached the middle of the meadow, the place where he had been most successful in his hunts. There he began to search. Confined to the ground, finding the worms was difficult, but the sparrow was determined. One by one he caught worms and piled them up on a rock. When he had accumulated a few dozen, he wrapped the worms up in a leaf and dragged them back to the roadway. There he saw the merchant. The sparrow, his beak chipped from pecking at the pebbly earth and his feet bleeding from frantic running, encountered the merchant. "Sir, I need your help. I made a terrible mistake. Can you help me? Look, I brought you worms. Please take them and give me back my feathers." The merchant carefully examined the worms the sparrow had neatly packed into the leaf. "You want your feathers back for these pathetic little worms? Nonsense. I'll have to fatten them up for weeks before a sparrow would pay a feather for any of them. But look, I'll put them into this soil I keep here in this jar. Thank you for those worms. You've been useful after all." "So, you'll give me back my feathers?" the sparrow implored, a hopeful, sheepish look on his face. "No, don't you know the deal? It's worms for feathers, not feathers for worms." "But I can't fly. I can't hunt. I can't do anything." "That's your problem, not mine." "But I'll starve," the sparrow pleaded. The merchant, a red, devilish glow now emanating from his eyes, looked lustily at the sparrow. He bent over, ignoring the bird's impotent attempt to escape, and picked him up. "Don't worry," the devil said. "You won't starve. I'll keep you fat and tasty." And with that, he threw the bird into a cage. Hall closed his laptop. Kevin got out of his chair. He went to the bathroom and shaved. This is Ari Mendelson. I hope you're enjoying Consent. I'd love it if you could show your appreciation for my years of hard work by hitting that like button and subscribing to my channel. But why keep this adventure to ourselves? I wrote Kingmaker because I believe its message of keeping control of our own minds is one that America needs to hear. Young men especially will profit from learning the message that lies at the heart of these novels, that the straightest path to happiness is by improving yourself, one step at a time, rather than attempting to change others. So, share this audiobook far and wide across your favorite social platforms. See the description below for other ways for you to support my work. Thank you so much for your time and attention.